I work at the crappy gas station at the edge of town. Weird things happen here. I had a blog for a while before mysterious powers shut it down. And somewhere along the way, I pissed off a bunch of very bad people. Oh, and I can't sleep. Yep, that pretty much sums it all up. Everything else is just details. I guess apologies are in order for any of you who are waiting to hear back from me. I've been a little busy lately. I'm still working at that crappy gas station at the edge of town, and these days I'm running things all by myself. Yeah, everyone else is gone now. Jerry was the first to leave. Not gonna lie, that sucked more than I was expecting. Rosa wasn't too far behind him, and Amy, she was the last holdout. But eventually, even she couldn't stay here any longer. Her replacement was an overweight Italian guy named Deputy Harold Love. He drops by once a week or so to make sure the place hasn't burned all the way down, but besides that, he and I don't really hang out much. Even my longtime torturer Spencer seems to have gone dark on me. I haven't gotten a threatening phone call or surprise attack in months. Now, of course, there's a decent chance that he and Detective Riggin finally managed to kill one another, and if that's the case, I probably won't lose any sleep over it. That was a joke, by the way. I'm not likely to lose any sleep no matter what. I'm trying my damnedest to keep things lighthearted right now. After all, as my recently deceased psychiatrist once said, a little gallows humor never hurt anybody. Plus, if I don't find some way to laugh, I just might lose what's left of my notoriously fragile mind. To be fair, I'm not completely alone here. There's that disembodied head in an ice chest behind the counter. He can be quite the chatterbox sometimes. Plus, I still get the occasional customer, although sales have slowed down quite a bit following the organization's efforts to strangle us out of business. We only get deliveries once a month now, and I can't even remember the last time our pumps had any gas in them. Are you lost? That's probably my fault. My mind isn't as sharp as it used to be. Sometimes I forget what I'm saying and go off on little tangents. Sometimes the head in the ice chest has to remind me to stop telling the customers my entire life story and just ring them up and get them out of here already. It's not safe having anyone else in the store. He reminds me quite often. It's not safe for them or us. Anyone coming in could be part of the invasion. But I don't think they're going to send anyone else to kill me. I think they realize that this is siege warfare, and the best thing for them to do is sit tight and wait me out. It's a brilliant plan, and it looks like it's working. I haven't left the gas station in a long time. Supplies are thin, and reinforcements are not on the way. Sorry. Where was I again? Oh, right. You're probably wondering how things got this bad, aren't you? Well, to borrow a cliche, it's a long story. I didn't lose it all at once. I think things started way back in February when a man came into the store and asked me to tell him the scariest story I knew. This was before Jerry left. I had just heard that there was a good chance I might soon be getting a new fancy pants prosthetic to replace the crutches I'd been using ever since I lost my real leg in a nasty work-related accident a couple months earlier. Long story. The owners of the gas station decided to give me a modest pay raise, their way of saying sorry and please don't sue us. One of the stalkers trying to kill me had just been sucked into a nightmare hell dimension. Short story. And to top it all off, the traveling carnival was coming to town. To be honest, things were going pretty well. I'd made the mistake of growing complacent, of taking it all for granted. Jerry and Rosa and Amy had started to make me think that my life was almost normal. Hell, I'd go so far as to say I was actually happy and looking forward to the future. I was wrapping up another 16-hour shift when a man came into the gas station. By all accounts, he seemed pretty unremarkable. His entire appearance was, in a word, forgettable. He wore a generic suit and tie of gray or blue. He had generic medium-length, darkish brownish hair. He stood somewhere between 5'8" and 6'2". His generic face was completely ordinary. He had 2 arms, 2 legs, you get the point. I barely registered him as a background character, and after he entered, I quickly tuned him out. Rosa showed up to work with a big, excited smile on her face, a good 15 minutes before her shift was supposed to start, and ran up to the counter where I was seated. "Good morning, sunshine." I returned her smile and put away the book I'd been working on. "Hey, Rosa." She always seemed a little happier than what made sense to me. I'd never met another employee so excited to come into work at the crappy gas station, but Rosa was nothing if not perpetually cheerful. She walked up to me and dropped an old paperback on the counter, exclaiming, "I loved this book. It was so good." I laughed. She was referring to the campy sci-fi drama that I'd loaned her a couple days earlier. One of my very favorites. Highly entertaining, but not a good book by any stretch of the imagination. "I'm glad you liked it," I said. "It's actually the first in the series." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yeah, but they kind of get progressively worse with each installment. I wouldn't get too excited if I were you." "Well, if you loan me the next one, I can pay you back with coffee sometime." "Yo, nerds!" We both looked up to see Jerry walking through the doorway. He was wearing sunglasses, a gray hoodie, and a white t-shirt that read, "My name is Jerry," in big, bold lettering. In one hand, he had a 40-ounce styrofoam cup with a red straw poking out, and smart money would say the contents of that container were alcoholic. In the other, he held a small greeting card. Before we could form a response, he was already next to us. He dropped the card on the counter next to the book and then said, "Y'all sign this card I made for Leroy?" "You made Leroy a card?" I asked with an unshakable, overwhelming sense of déjà vu. "That's so sweet," Rosa chimed in before picking it up and reading it out loud. "Hey, Leroy, sorry you got your arm ripped off by a giant tentacle monster." "Oh, look, he drew a picture of it and everything." "What can I say?" Jerry took a long swig of his drink, then continued, "I'm a really caring kind of guy." "Hang on," I said. "Do either of you get the feeling that we've been here before? That we've done this already?" "Nope," Jerry retorted without even giving it any thought. I suppose it could have just been my broken brain playing tricks on me again. "Excuse me," said the generic man in a deep, calm, soothing voice, like that of a late-night radio show host. "Okay," I said. "I'm looking for Jeremy Pascal." "Are you now?" I asked. "That's right. I understand he works here." We all stood in an awkward silence. Jerry and I stared at the man. The man stared back. Rosa cut her eyes between each of us, trying to figure out what was going on. Then, after a painfully long standoff, Jerry lifted the drink to his mouth and emptied it through the straw, swallowing loudly with each gulp, and finally finishing with that annoying, scratchy noise that straw makes when a drink is about done. You know the one. "Are you?" The man was cut off by the sound of more loud slurping. Once Jerry was finished, the man tried again. "Are you Jeremy Toulouse Pascal?" "Nope," said Jerry. The man reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a photograph. He looked at it, then at Jerry, then back at it, and then he put it away. I didn't catch a peek at the photo, but it doesn't take a genius to know he wasn't looking at a Marmaduke comic. "Can you tell me when Jeremy is expected to begin his shift?" Jerry shifted his eyes at me and answered, "I think that dude quit like a week ago." "Sorry," the man said. "I didn't catch your name." "Leroy," said Jerry. The man looked at Jerry's shirt, then at Jerry's face. Jerry took it a step further, picking up the card to Leroy and making a big demonstrative act of reading it before looking me in the eyes and saying, "Wow, Jack, thank you for this amazing card. So kind of you. And the artwork. Nothing short of superbitude." The man sighed, turned around and left the gas station. "What was that about?" asked Rosa, just like I knew she would. "Don't worry about it. If anyone asks, my name is Leroy now." He pulled off his shirt and hoodie and threw them both to the ground. Amazingly, he managed to do the whole action without displacing his sunglasses or styrofoam cup. Then, as he stood there shirtless like a moron, he exhaled loudly and said, "Man, it sure is drafty in here." Rosa politely diverted her eyes. "I think I have an extra t-shirt somewhere in my car that you can borrow. Jack, you want to come with me and help me look?" "Actually," I answered, "I need to talk to Leroy here before I head out for the day. Do you mind?" She smiled and put up her hand to stop me and said, "Say no more. I'll be right back." Then she left. Jerry, still shirtless, walked around the counter and grabbed a pack of smokes off the wall. I noticed that he'd finally gone through with that plan to turn the bullet wound on his back into another tattoo. He settled on a flower, with petals emerging from the round lump of scar tissue. "What's up, Buttercup?" he asked. "I see that Eric's back in town, huh?" He stared at me. I couldn't exactly tell what that stare was supposed to mean. Maybe he was working up a good response. Maybe he just remembered he'd left the stove on. But after a second or two, he answered, "Yeah, he's visiting for a couple days, so what?" Eric used to be a local, but he got out of town years ago. I never knew him. But when we leave, we lose our identity, and all we are is whatever we leave behind, right? I think Jean-Paul Sartre said something along those lines. My point is, I didn't know Eric, but I did know his niece, Vanessa. Vanessa was another coworker and a mutual friend of ours, until one day, a couple months back, when she got fed up with the small town life. She ran away and left a note saying she wanted to go find herself. But after a few weeks, it was the state police that found her. She'd gotten lost on a walking trail, broke her leg, and died from exposure. Or at least, that was the official story. Jerry and I knew something was off, and not just because we were present when the EMTs pulled her lifeless body out of the gas station wall. The agents that showed up the next day were both specific and vivid in their threats of what would happen if anyone challenged the official story, and finished the whole thing off with a polite reminder that nobody would ever believe us if we tried to tell the truth. But that was before her hard-ass uncle showed up again out of the blue, making crazy threats and trying to get himself killed. I know we all grieve in our own ways, but he struck me as the sort that was out for blood. All in all, it was another distraction that I had no interest in getting involved in, but he'd come by earlier that day looking for Jerry for some reason. I'm just saying, I don't think you should get involved in whatever he has planned. Don't worry, dude. I'm not going to do anything stupid, he said, waving his hands in the air to demonstrate what stupid looks like. Somehow, I didn't find his assurance all that reassuring. "Wow," said the man standing on the other side of the counter. We both turned to look at him. I wish I had a picture of this. I'd put it in my employee handbook under how not to behave when customers are in the store. He was a 50-something-year-old man in a white sport coat and a blue button-up with hazel eyes surrounded by wrinkles. Above and below, like he was accustomed to staring into the sun. The color of his eyes matched his short brown hair, freshly cut and combed, and dapper, like he was on his way to a job interview at a 1950s haberdashery. He was heavy in that rich old man way, not fat. No, poor people are fat. He was seemingly fake and television-y accent. And when he spoke, it was with an extra southern drawl like a watered-down Colonel Sanders. It was a seemingly fake and television-y accent, like how people who have never been to the South think Southerners are supposed to sound. It was unnerving. I guess he was probably referring to the fact that Jerry was totally showing nip. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, hoping he would say no and leave the store forever. He inspected the tiered spinning rack of pork rinds, pulled off a bag and flipped it over, then returned it to the display and said, "I usually don't do this part of the job myself. Most of the time, I send one of my regional VPs, but after everything I read about this place, I couldn't believe it. I had to come down here and see for myself. My name is Francis Howard, and I'm considering buying it." He handed me a business card that read simply, "Francis Howard, MD," with a telephone number underneath. I assumed the MD meant he was a doctor, And not from Maryland, although those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, are they? I gave the card to Jerry to throw away and asked, "Buying what?" This gas station. Take a look at your surroundings. All I see is untapped potential. I think we can turn it around and get a serious return on the investment." Well, this was certainly one of the weirder encounters I'd had. "I don't think the owners are inclined to sell." "Well, that's where you're wrong, son. We've been in negotiations ever since the new year. They wanted to keep a lid on it, but now that we're close to making a deal, I thought it was high time I come by and introduce myself. You must be Jack, right? I've heard an awful lot about you, and I guess that would make this half-naked fellow here." "Leroy," Jerry interjected. "Sup?" "Okay then, Leroy. Is there a good reason you're not following the dress code?" "Hey, you're right, Doc. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have been wearing these sunglasses, but I just had eye surgery following a horrible ocular injury I sustained pushing a small child out of the way of a speeding bus." "I was referring to the fact that you're exposing your bare chest." "What?" Jerry yelled. "I'm not wearing a shirt?" He put his hands over his nipples and bellowed at full volume. "Damn my eyes! I had no idea I left home today without my shirt. Why didn't anyone tell me?" He reached back to the dirty magazine rack and grabbed one and pushed it into the doctor's hands. "Here, as my token of sincere apologetitude, please take this porno." The man looked at the magazine, then at me. Not sure what he expected from me. I just gave him a look that said, "You're on your own," because I knew something about Jerry that he didn't. I knew a power struggle with Jerry is a fool's errand, because he doesn't play to win. He plays to make sure everybody else loses. But the doctor kept his cool, putting the pornographic magazine under his arm and saying, "I feel like there are going to be some big changes once I take over. Normally, I like to hire a local manager to oversee my properties, but I've got a feeling I'm going to be a little more hands-on with this one." Rosa came back inside, walked around the doctor, and handed Jerry a pink t-shirt. "Here you go. It might be a little small, but it's the only one I could find." When she noticed the man on the other side of the counter, she smiled politely and said, "Hello, are you finding everything okay?" "Wow, 3 employees." Dr. Howard scoffed. "Why does it take 3 of you to run a place like this? You can definitely expect some staffing adjustments once the sale goes through." Rosa stared at him with big, confused eyes, the way a deer stares at an oncoming meteor, and uttered one word. "What?" "In the meantime," he said, "I think you 3 need to take a step back and take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourselves, am I really doing the best job I can?" "Yeah?" Jerry responded. "Well, I think you need to step back and take a good, long, hard gorilla dick and use it to go screw yourself." The doctor did his best to hide the rage pressure cooking inside of him, but I could see where it was tearing at the seams. He faked a smile, then turned and walked out the store. Just before he got through the doors, Jerry screamed out at the top of his lungs, "Enjoy that freaky weird porno, Dr. Howard!" The doctor stopped for a split second, like he was going to turn around and respond. But then he continued outside to where a stretch Hummer was parked waiting for him, climbed into the back seat, and rode off. That a-hole didn't even buy any gas from us. Once he was gone, I looked at Jerry and asked, "You know that an erect gorilla penis is only a couple inches long, right?" He made a sour face and shook his head like he'd just bit into an electric lemon. No. Why would anyone know that? Why do you know that?" He shivered and went outside for a smoke. Rosa picked up his clothes and started tidying the place up, despite the fact that she wasn't even on the clock yet. I took the opportunity to call and speak with the owners, who assured me that they had absolutely no intention of ever selling the gas station. Dr. Howard had made them several offers, and they had repeatedly turned him down. He finally told them to name their price, which must be why he was so sure the sale was going to happen. What he didn't know, though, was that the owners were never interested in being rich or even turning a profit at all. Anyone with eyes could see that this place hemorrhaged money on the daily. I don't know how the owners could afford to pay what must be astronomical insurance premiums and still keep the lights running. But I always assumed that it was just one of those things. Look, I'm a simple guy. I run the cash register. I don't question how or why this place is still open. But if I were to begin asking questions, a good place to start might be, why does the doctor want to own this shithole so badly? I reconciled my cash drawer, grabbed my crutches, and clocked out. After that, I sat in the booth seat next to the doors waiting for Amy. Deputy Amelia O'Brien, to come pick me up. In the meantime, I started talking to Rosa. You know, she said, the carnival is in town. I heard. It was the same weird carnival that comes every year around this time. They set up on the old fairgrounds past the railroad tracks, bringing big tents and shows and rides of questionable safety standards and edible fried garbage. The locals love it, and the gas station gets a big boost from the extra traffic. Well, I'm not doing anything on Wednesday. At first, all I could think was that was a weirdly specific thing for her to say. Any significance of the date had completely escaped me. Okay, I said. I don't know if you had any plans for that day either. As a rule, I generally don't make plans. With a lifespan like mine, long-term usually doesn't factor into the question, and I find it much safer to live each day as if it could be my last. But not in a YOLO kind of way, more of a rather just sit right here in the relative safety of the moment and read a book kind of way. Sure, that probably sounds pretty pathetic, but that's just because it really is. And I don't care. I'd have to check the work schedule, I told her. I already did, she said. Neither of us are working that night. Oh, okay. Well, what? Do you want to go to the carnival with me? I weighed the question over in my mind. I hadn't been to the carnival since I was a child. The last time I went, I barfed on a carny and got separated from my foster family. I vaguely remember getting lost, trying to take a shortcut through the woods, and finally hitchhiking back into town a few hours later. I was 8 or 9 at the time. Jerry walked out of the bathroom and announced, "The mirror leg is getting a lot worse. I think it's about time to replace it again." He must have sensed something was going on from the looks on our faces, because the next thing he said was, "Hey, what are you guys talking about? I can sense something is going on from the looks on your faces." Rosa asked if I wanted to go to the carnival on Wednesday. Jerry made that face he makes when he's pretending to think. Then he said, "You know what? That sounds like fun. I'd love to go." Right about then, O'Brien walked into the store. She nodded at the others and said, "Rosie, Shaggy," then to me, "You ready?" Before I could answer, Jerry blurted out, "O'Brien should totally come with." "Come with you where?" "Wednesday night. We're all going to the carnival together." "On Valentine's Day?" she asked. "Oh, that's right. Wednesday is Valentine's Day. Wait a second. Was Rosa asking me out on a date?" "You sure that's a good idea? There's still at least one psychopath stalker out there trying to hunt you down and kill you." "It'll be fun," Jerry replied. "We can all meet up here at 8 and ride together in the cop car. Sound good, Rosa?" "Oh, yeah, I guess." "Cool beans," he said. Then, as he walked back out the front doors, Jerry yelled, "I call shotgun!" That night, when I returned from my overnight shift, Jerry was already there. Or maybe he was still there. He doesn't leave all that often. He and Rosa were sitting next to each other behind the counter, playing chess with those pieces he carved out of soap. He was still wearing Rosa's pink t-shirt, with Leroy's old name tag pinned over his heart. I counted down Rosa's till while they wrapped up their game, not sure who won. And after she left, I pulled out my laptop to continue working on the book. Before I could get started, the old madman-looking doctor approached the other side of the counter and cleared his throat. I looked up at him and said, "Doctor, welcome back. Can I help you with something?" He placed a hammer on the counter in front of me without saying a word. I rang it up like a good employee and gave him his total. He went to hand me his card, but as I reached for it, he pulled it away. "What are you working on?" he asked. "Oh, I'm writing my memoirs." Not sure why I answered him honestly. I guess I just didn't have any reason to lie. Is that a fact? Well, it's not just my opinion. Are you a storyteller, Jack? Jerry chimed in. Jack's the best storyteller. I had literally forgotten that Jerry was sitting right next to me until that moment. The man gave a wry smile and asked, Do you know any scary stories? I laughed, and Jerry continued singing my undeserved praises. Jack is the best scary stories to rock your socks off. Tell him about the time I peed a demon back to hell. Oh, or that time we had to fight off zombie nudists, or that time you were a vampire for a week. I elbowed him in the shoulder and said, I've told you 100 times that last one never happened. He smiled and said, Sure it didn't. Wink. Yes, he actually said the word wink. The doctor leaned over the counter and asked, Pardon me if I'm out of line with this question, but what's the scariest story you know? Not sure. Maybe you can read my book when it's done. He laughed a good, chilling movie villain kind of laugh and said, How about I tell you boys one? If it's not the scariest story you've ever heard, I'll leave and never come back. I'm sure you'd like that, right? Yeah, I answered truthfully. Jerry asked, What if it is? I felt like that question was wholly unnecessary. Working at the crappy gas station at the edge of town has left us with a completely warped definition of scary. Whatever the doctor could come up with, I was confident it couldn't hold a candle to what we had already been through. Well, he replied, if my story terrifies you like no other, if my story is too scary for you, then I say you pay for this hammer and we call it a night. Jerry chuckled and said, You're on, moron. Well, the doctor began. Like all of the best tales, this one is a completely true story. Jerry laughed, but I didn't. Something about this man's sense of confidence was leaving me completely unsettled. He continued. This is the story of two young men not unlike yourselves, brothers. They came from a very privileged, well-to-do New England family. Old money, you know the type. They were both accepted into an Ivy League college, where they got along just fine. But by all accounts, they had a perfect life. One day during spring break, the two brothers decided to take their lovely girlfriends on an extended vacation to their summer home in the Rockies. However, at the end of the trip, only 3 people returned. I couldn't tell where this story was going, but so far it seemed boring. I turned to Jerry to see if he shared my opinion, but one look at his face told me he was hearing a completely different tale than I was. His skin was white. His heart was beating hard enough that I could see the pulse bouncing in his neck, and he was starting to sweat hard. Theories swirled about what happened to the missing brother. Unfortunately, the remaining witnesses proved unreliable. The police investigation stalled and they closed it as a cold case. The man's smile was sinister. But I know what happened. What actually happened. And I know why he wants to remain missing. Jerry pushed me away from the cash register, opened it up, and pulled out a 20, before slapping it on the counter and yelling, You win! Terrible scary story. I don't even want to know what happens next. He reached over the counter and grabbed the doctor by the lips and squeezed them with his thumb and forefinger and said, Shush! The doctor smacked Jerry's hand away and said, Don't put your dirty fingers anywhere near my mouth, you heathen. Jerry grabbed the hammer and pushed it into the doctor's hand. Then he took off Leroy's name badge, dropped it on the floor and said, Hey, Jack, I've got to clock out and go home early. I just remembered I left my cat on fire. I told him, You were never on the clock. Even better, he exclaimed before speed walking around the corner and out the back door. I turned my attention back to the doctor. What was that? He laughed again and turned to leave, but not without one final admonition. I'll be seeing you around, Jack. A few hours later, the store phone rang, and my palms started sweating, my spidey senses, or maybe just a Pavlovian response. I developed a subconscious dread every time that noise cuts into my peaceful solitude. A ringing store phone almost never brings good news. Sometimes it's my stalker, Spencer, calling to taunt me and warn that he's getting closer. But ever since I put a bullet in his stomach, the shortcut way, he hasn't had too much to say. Nevertheless, a ringing store phone has to be answered, and I'm nothing if not a good employee. So I took a deep breath and picked up. Hello? Jack. A woman's voice. Yes? It's me. Me who? Who the hell do you think? O'Brien. I didn't recognize her because she almost never calls me by my real name. Only when things are really serious. This wasn't a good sign. Sorry, what's up? Is everything okay there? Yeah, why? You're not being held hostage or anything, are you? If so, you can cough into the phone and I'll know. I'm not being held hostage at the moment, but is there some reason you suspect I should be? I'm 10 miles from you at a crime scene down by Dead Man's Curve. We got 2 bodies, unidentified. Looks like it might be just a regular car accident, but things don't really add up. That's unfortunate, but I don't see what that has to do with me. They don't have any ID, car isn't registered, no license, yada yada. You know how things go around here. Sure. But they did have one thing on them, a cell phone. Looks like it's a pay-as-you-go deal, but we'll send it to the lab to see if we can trace the original buyer. Okay. Unless for some reason I need to make sure it doesn't find its way to the lab. Why would you do that? I checked the call history before we bagged it. Jack, there are only 2 numbers that this phone has called over the last 2 years. Okay, still not sure where you're going with this. One is the gas station, the other is your cell phone. All at once it hit me. Oh, I said. Well, want to point me in the right direction? I know who the bodies are. You going to keep me waiting for dramatic effect? Sorry, my mind was swimming. This time my spidey senses were right. This was bad news. Very bad news. I think that you just found the owners of the gas station. Sorry for that abrupt ending earlier. Somebody came into the store, so I had to put my laptop away and put my game face on. He asked if I knew that the pumps weren't working. I was totally prepared to put him down with my trusty baseball bat. But the disembodied head in the box assured me he was just a regular old boring human customer. Oh, I bet that probably comes as a surprise. Yeah, these days I keep a baseball bat under the counter at all times. I had to use it way more than you'd expect. Don't worry, I don't just go around cracking skulls all willy-nilly. I only attack someone if the head in the box identifies them as part of the invasion. I mean, I'm not some kind of lunatic. Anyway, the guy bought some gum and left, so I can get back to telling the story. Where was I again? O'Brien asked if I didn't mind coming down to identify the bodies of the owners, but I explained to her that I wouldn't be much help. Truth was, I'd never actually met the owners in person, and I had no idea what they looked like. I only knew them from their voices. They were a weird couple, husband and wife. I didn't know their real names, but they insisted we call them Mama and Pops. I have met their daughter, though, but that's a story for much later. O'Brien let me know that this was probably going to be written up in the official documentation as another run-of-the-mill accident. But off the record, she knew something was up. There was no logical reason to think that it was going to be related to me or the gas station, but come on. What are the chances this won't have anything to do with the gas station? I promised her I'd be careful and she disconnected. When I looked back up, Jerry was standing on the other side of the counter, wearing a bad fake mustache and that pair of Coke bottle glasses from the Lost and Found box. Hey, I said, I thought you'd left. Jack, he responded. It's me, Jerry. He pulled off the glasses and the mustache. Yeah, I know. You're still wearing Rose's pink shirt. What do you... Never mind. Can I just ask what the hell is going on? I need to tell you something. That's literally what you're doing, so good job so far. No, not here. He slowly turned and eyed the display of lawn gnomes by the door. Meet me in the walk-in cooler in 5 minutes. I swear to dark God, Jerry, if you're about to tell me that there's a dead body in the trunk of your car, I'm gonna lose it. Relax, he said. What I have to tell you is way more interesting than that. I rolled my eyes and set the egg timer to 5 minutes. Jerry reapplied his disguise and went outside for a smoke. As soon as the doors closed, our store phone rang again. I didn't even hesitate to pick it up, assuming it would be O'Brien again. Hello? The person on the other end of the line took a long, deep sigh. This was not O'Brien. I repeated my greeting, a little slower this time. Hello? Hey, Jack. It's FJ. Thought it was about time I gave you a courtesy call. FJ was Farmer Jr., a guy from town who used to relentlessly pester me about a crop of hand plants growing out back by the dumpster. I hadn't heard from him since he stopped ordering his bulk animal feed from us, and I assumed he'd finally moved on to another obsession. What can I do for you, FJ? I want you to know that you're a real piece of crap. He took a pause. I guess he was giving me a turn to respond. Okay, I said, thanks for calling. Before I could hang up, he went into his rant. It sounded like it had been building up inside of him for a while, fermenting like a batch of moonshine and now full of poison and passion. My family gave you all our business for years, and we ain't never trying to screw you over. And you sit up there judging us, acting like you want to do right by us. But you ain't nothing but another asshole that thinks he's better than everybody. You ain't even man enough to tell me to my face that you got more ham plants sitting behind the store. Now I offered to pay you. You could have done right. You could have done the right thing, but you lied. 'Cause you're too stupid to know what a good deal looks like. I ought to kick your ass for being so stupid. Farmer, I told you the hand plants are gone. Yeah, they're gone. Now, even if they weren't, that ship has sailed. You know how much money he was going to give me for those? All I needed was a dozen of them and I could have retired rich. That's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. And now it's over because you're a stupid, lying piece of crap. And next time I see you, I'm going to mess you up. I never did find out what it was Farmer wanted those hand plants for. I just assumed it was some kind of weird sex thing. This revelation that he was trying to sell them was more than a little surprising. I may have sought more details if he didn't seem so angry and drunk. Instead, I tried to wrap up the conversation while the wrapping was good. Okay, well, I should get back to work. Screw you, Jack. It was nice catching up. I'm going to kick your teeth in. I'll talk to you later. You better watch your back, 'cause I'm coming for you. Good night, FJ. Good night. I zipped up my jacket and dug my hands into my pockets to try and keep from shivering. Okay, I said, watching my words turn to clouds in front of my face. I think we've got the temperature set to low in here. Jerry didn't seem to mind the cold. So here's the thing, he started. I paid for Van's funeral. I stared at him for a second, trying to think of the right question to ask. Finally, I came up with why. We'd gone to Vanessa's service a few days after they found her body. She and Jerry were close, closer than I'd seen him with anyone. And even though I had certain reasons for not wanting to go to yet another funeral, I tagged along for moral support. I own exactly one black suit, which I purchased several months earlier in anticipation for another upcoming funeral, but I haven't even tried it on. It had just been hanging there in my closet like a dark omen with a note attached for whoever ends up going through my things after I'm gone. I went ahead and put it on for Vanessa's service, and I was surprised to find that it fit perfectly. Jerry wore a tuxedo t-shirt and tricked me into taking a few shots and accidentally getting drunk beforehand. Not surprisingly, awkwardness ensued. He tried to wing a eulogy that nobody asked him to give, and O'Brien had to escort us both away from the scene. The whole thing was kind of a blur, but I do remember thinking to myself that her funeral seemed a little fancy for a fellow minimum-wage gas station orphan. I just assumed that she had some wealthy relative I didn't know about. Jerry gave a shrug and said, I wanted this town to see that she had people who cared enough about her to keep her from having a pauper's McFuneral. If I had more time, I would have gotten somebody famous to show up and really confuse the other guests, like Prince or David Bowie. Okay, and next question. How? Oh, he continued. So here's something you don't know about me. He took a deep breath. I'm kind of rich. Jerry, I pieced it together from Dr. Douchebag's story. I'm not an idiot. I know you had a past before you ended up in the mathematist program. I'm asking how you got a hold of enough money to pay for Vanessa's funeral. Before I decided to take my sabbatical, I squirreled a little extra funding into a savings account. I thought it was safe, but I guess they were watching it after all. Now I think they're sending people to find me. Who's they? My parents. Hello? Somebody was calling from the front of the store. I told Jerry to hold that thought and went back out to the front to see two burly men in camo jackets and sunglasses. They were strapped and wearing flak vests that read, Fugitive Recovery Agent. They looked absolutely ridiculous, like real-life action figures. There were plenty of good reasons for bounty hunters to be poking around the gas station. People in this town were known for collecting warrants and trying to vanish. Spencer, Bo, my third-grade English teacher, any number of locals. But whatever they were doing in here, they didn't stick around too long. The first guy paid for their gas, while the second scoped out our hot dog roller. When they finally left, I went back to the walk-in cooler to let Jerry know that it was safe for him to come out. Jerry loaded up on beer, chips, and jerky, then he left. I didn't see him again for the rest of the night. About an hour later, the phone rang, as usual. My heart started beating funny. I answered. Hello? Another voice from my past. Hello, shithead. I sighed. What do you want, Bo? I wanted to let you know that I was right all along. You thought you'd won, but now I'm more powerful than you can even imagine. Do you want to know where I am right now? I already knew he was going to say something stupid like, I'm right outside, or I'm in the building, or I can see the look on your face. Bo was always pathetic and predictable, even when he was still alive. But I didn't feel like giving him the satisfaction. Hello, I said again. Are you still there, Bo? Yes, I'm still here, and I wanted to let you know that... Hello, I interrupted. You're breaking up. I can barely hear you. He grunted. I was trying to say that. It sounds like you're underwater. I was saying... Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Jack? Oh, I can hear you now. Go ahead. I was saying that I'm more powerful than you could ever imagine, and now I... Hang on 1 second. What? I have another call coming in. You what? Do you mind if I put you on hold for just a second? Really? Yeah, it'll just be 1 second. He grunted again. Fine. Okay, I'll be right back. I put the phone down next to the receiver, which is where I left it for the rest of the night. Then I cracked open a new book to pass the time until the sun came up. We met up at the gas station before the sun went down on Wednesday. Rosa was the first to arrive, but she didn't look like she was even close to ready for the cold. She was wearing a knee-length yellow dress and light blue jean jacket. It looked nice, but once we got outside, she was going to be freezing. I also noticed that, for some reason, her hair was curlier than normal. I was still counting down my till when she walked in. Our new part-timer, a guy named Daniel, was taking over for me. When he looked up and saw her, he made a face like a hungry man at Thanksgiving dinner and said, Damn, girl, you look good tonight. You got a hot date or something? She smiled wide and said with a laugh, No, just going to the carnival. Really? He said with doubt. Well, whoever it is, he's very lucky. That's a really nice dress. Thanks, she beamed. It has pockets. I handed Daniel my countdown sheet to sign. Then I walked around to the other side of the counter and said, I feel like I'm underdressed. She walked up to me, took my name tag off my chest, and stuffed it into my jacket pocket, then said cheerfully, There, now you're perfect. I could feel Daniel's eyes on us, but I shrugged it off and took my usual seat at the booth by the front door. Rosa took her spot across from me, and we made small talk until O'Brien walked in. She scanned the store and looked back at us and asked, We still waiting on Goofy? I told her we were, and she sat down in the booth next to me. Suddenly I didn't feel so underdressed. O'Brien was sporting jeans and a navy Long Island University sweater, an obvious choice for a let's keep things professional night out. Finally, Jerry staggered in. Rosa smiled and said, "I like your new shirt." He was wearing a plain white tee that read, "My name is Leroy, fight me." "Thanks," he responded. "I like your sexy dress." "Thanks, it has pockets." With the gang all together, we loaded up into the cruiser and made our way to the fairgrounds for the worst Valentine's Day ever. I'd like to go on the record as saying carnivals aren't nearly as much fun as anyone expects them to be. For some reason, when one thinks of carnivals, they tend to think about the rides and foods and spectacle. But they always seem to forget the long lines and the bad smells and aggressive carnival barkers. I guess good memories have a kind of filter. We stood in line for tickets while the temperature plummeted. Rosa started to shiver, but pretended she was okay, insisting it's really not that cold. As soon as we were done, I hit up the closest place that had hot coffee and got us all around. O'Brien was clearly in bodyguard mode the whole night, not daring to crack a smile or let down her guard lest any of the danger slip past and murder us all. Jerry passed his flask around, but Rosa was the only one to take a swig. It's really not that cold, my ass. After we caffeinated up, Rosa asked what we wanted to do first. I scanned the lines and noticed that the shortest one was in front of the crappy little haunted hell house attraction. I figured we might as well, considering it was close by, and it might be a little warmer indoors. It was exactly the kind of silly spook fest you would have expected. The first room was full of snap animatronic machines that jump out and scream while a strobe light goes off. The next room was designed to look like a prison cell with a dummy in a blue jumpsuit attached to an electrical chair being electrocuted. I couldn't see the others' reactions in the poor lighting, but I was hoping they were getting some kind of enjoyment. I, on the other hand, was just trying to get through it. The next room was lit in all red, with white webbing covering the walls and a giant robot spider attached to the ceiling. Suddenly I realized something was wrong. I looked towards Jerry to see if he noticed it too, but he just had a big, dumb smile on his face, blissfully unaware of the smell I noticed as soon as we walked into this room. It was bad. Bad enough that even the carnival funk couldn't drown it out. I looked around the room to try and find the source of that all too familiar scent of death, but there was nothing here. Guys. They couldn't hear me over the sound of spider screams and pushed through to the next room. I followed closely. It was much worse in here. This room was pitch black, save for a tiny trail of glowing mushrooms leading from the door of the spider room through this dark room and straight up to the door on the other side. Rosa grabbed me by the arm and squeezed tight as we started through the pitch black. A few steps in, the light snapped on, blinked sporadically to the sound of loud booming, and disappeared, leaving us in the dark again. I could see what they were going for, a strobe light effect to simulate lightning, and for a split second we saw that the room we were in was completely filled with dead bodies. It was almost too fast to really see, but there was gruesome gore and fake dismembered victims. Rosa laughed nervously. "That was pretty freaky," she whispered. I stopped walking. "Guys," I said again, a little louder. Rosa pulled at my arm. "Hey, let's keep going. This room smells terrible." I looked in the general direction of O'Brien and asked, "Amy." The room was still completely dark. After a second of silence, she answered, "Yeah, I know." Rosa's voice cracked as she asked, "What's happening? Why are we stopped?" Jerry was the one to answer. That smells like a real dead body." The lightning effect went off again, and for another split second we saw the macabre room of death in all its horrible glory and gore. Dummies propped up to look like burn victims, stab victims. A bloodied soul torn in half at the torso lay in wide-eyed terror on the ground next to us. And against the wall, there was a naked man nailed up with arms spread wide open like a perverted image of Jesus. His eyes were milky white and his bottom jaw was missing, but that wasn't enough to obscure him. Even in this condition, I knew who he was. The lights went out again. "Amy," I said again. I heard the sound of a click and knew immediately that she had just chambered a round into her service pistol. Rosa grabbed my hand and squeezed even tighter. Shit was about to get real. The lights clicked on at full blast, and for a short instant, I was completely blind. But then the door on the opposite side of the room slammed open, and a horrific clown bearing his unnatural razor-sharp teeth rushed in with a running chainsaw raised over his head, chuckling maniacally. O'Brien moved lightning fast, shielding the rest of us, and landing a solid punch to the center of the clown's face. He dropped the fake chainsaw and hit the ground on his back with a bounce. Rosa let out a long scream, and before any of us knew what had happened, O'Brien had him flipped over and handcuffed with her knee pressed into the center of his back. "Holy freaking hell," the clown squealed. "It's not a real chainsaw, you dumb bitch." "What the hell is going on?" begged Rosa. With the lights all switched on, I could finally see well enough to maneuver my crutches through the pile of fake dead bodies to the man nailed against the wall. The clown must have seen where I was headed and put things together. "Oh shit," he said from his spot on the floor. "That wasn't there yesterday. You guys, I don't know how that got there. Hey, I just work here." Who is it?" Rosa asked. I looked right at him. I had to be 100% sure. "This is Farmer Jr.